He humiliated me in front of everyone over 180 acres of worthless dirt. 3 years later, that dirt was worth $25 million. And watching him realize what he'd thrown away became the most complicated victory of my life. I'll never forget that sound. Not the judge's gavel. Not my lawyer's defeated sigh. Not even my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. It was the laughter. Richard's attorney Daniel Foster, charging $850 an hour and worth every penny to people who could afford him, was holding up a photograph of my inheritance. 180 acres of sagebrush and dirt in eastern Wyoming, about 40 minutes outside Cheyenne. The land my father James had left me 2 years earlier, right before he passed. Your Honor, Daniel said, barely suppressing a smirk, Mrs. Winters is welcome to retain this ... asset. He said the word like it tasted bad. It's approximately 180 acres of scrubland, in the middle of nowhere. No road access. No utilities. No water rights that we can determine. Our assessment puts the value at maybe $5,000 if she's lucky enough to find someone willing to buy it. The courtroom, Richard's colleagues, his girlfriend Alyssa, sitting in the second row like she belonged there, even the court reporter, they were all trying not to laugh. Daniel wasn't done. Frankly, Your Honor, it's not worth the legal fees to argue over it. Let her have it. He glanced at me, and I saw something in his eyes that made my stomach turn. Pity mixed with contempt. Maybe she can camp there when she can't afford rent. That's when Richard laughed, not a polite chuckle, a full, genuine laugh that echoed off the wood-paneled walls, his head tipped back, his perfect teeth showing. The same laugh I'd heard 1,000 times during our 18 years of marriage, at dinner parties, watching movies on our couch, in bed after I'd said something he found charming. But this time, he was laughing at me. I sat there in my 6-year-old Ann Taylor dress, the only court-appropriate outfit I owned that still fit, and felt something crack inside my chest. Not my heart. That had broken months ago when I found the texts between him and Alyssa. This was something else. Something deeper. My dignity, maybe. The Judge Patricia Morrison, an older woman with reading glasses on, a chain cleared her throat. Mr. Foster, please proceed with the property division summary. I forced myself to listen this time, to really hear what I was losing. The house in the Denver suburbs that Rick and I had bought 15 years ago, when Michael was 4 and Sarah was 1. Rick retained primary ownership, valued at $850,000. I'd get $175,000 as my share of the equity, not half, because Judge Morrison had determined that Rick's income contributions outweighed my domestic contributions. The words had stung when she'd said them 2 weeks ago during the settlement conference. Your domestic contributions, while valuable, don't constitute the same financial investment as Mr. Winters' income over the 18-year marriage. The joint savings account we'd built together split 60-40 in Rick's favor. He got $144,000. I got $96,000. The retirement accounts, similar split. He kept the larger portion of his 401k, about $130,000. I got $50,000. Both cars stayed with Rick since they were titled in his name. He'd generously agreed to let me buy my Honda Civic from the marital estate for $8,000. The furniture, the wedding china, the flat-screen TV all stayed with the house, which meant they stayed with Rick. In total, I was walking away with $329,000 from an 18-year marriage to a man who made $320,000 a year. It sounded like a lot. It wasn't. After I paid Patricia's Fezavon legal aid attorneys needed something, and she'd fought harder than I'd had any right to expect, and after I paid the filing fees and court costs and all the other small expenses that added up, I'd have maybe $310,000. I'd need that for a down payment on a small house, or rent for years. For a car, for rebuilding a life. Rick, meanwhile, kept the house worth $850,000, another $144,000 in cash, and $130,000 in retirement funds. Over $1 million, plus his $320,000 salary that would keep coming. The judge had also awarded me alimony $3,000 a month for 3 years. Rehabilitative maintenance, she'd called it. Time for me to re-enter the workforce after 15 years at home. 3 years. Then I'd be on my own completely. And finally, Daniel said, pulling me back to the present. The Wyoming property inherited from Mrs. Winters' late father will remain with Mrs. Winters, valued at its assessed amount of $5,000, which will be deducted from her share of the marital estate. Wait, they were taking $5,000 from my share for land I'd inherited. Patricia leaned over. It's normal, she whispered. Inherited property is separate, but its value still counts in the overall division. Don't worry, it's only $5,000. Only $5,000. The judge looked at both of us. Is this settlement acceptable to both parties? Yes, Your Honor, Daniel said smoothly. Patricia looked at me. I could see the question in her eyes. Do you want to keep fighting? I thought about Michael, 16, and Sarah, 13. I thought about how they'd been sleeping on air mattresses at my sister Emily's house for the past 3 months while Rick stayed in our home. I thought about how exhausted I was. How every day of this divorce had felt like drowning. Yes, Your Honor, I whispered. Then this court approves the settlement. The divorce is finalized. The gavel came down. Rick caught up with me in the hallway outside. Alyssa hung back, examining her manicure French tips, professionally done. Carrie. His voice was softer now, almost kind. Somehow that made it worse. Look, I know this is hard. The word came out sharp. You're getting a fair deal. Patricia fought for you. You're getting over $300,000, plus alimony for 3 years. That's not nothing. He straightened his tie. Hermes, I noticed, new since the separation. I'm not trying to hurt you. I just, ... We grew apart. You have to see that. I looked at him. Really looked at him. This man I'd loved for 18 years. This man I'd given up my career for. I'd been working at an advertising firm when we met, junior copywriter, $42,000 a year, but with potential. We'd decided together that I'd stay home when Michael was born. His career was taking off. Mine could wait. 15 years later, wait had become never. I raised our children, I said quietly. I managed our home. I supported your career by making sure you never had to worry about anything domestic. And the court decided that was worth about $310,000 total. The law is clear. About financial contributions, I know what the law says, Rick. I picked up my bag. You got what you wanted. Congratulations. I walked away before he could respond. Patricia was waiting by the elevator. I'm sorry, she said. I did what I could. I know, and I did. Patricia had been juggling 14 cases. She'd stayed late 3 times to prepare for settlement conferences. She'd fought for me to keep the house, lost that battle, then fought for 50/50ths on everything else, lost most of that too. She'd gotten me the alimony, which was something. For what it's worth, she nodded toward the courtroom doors. Hang on to that Wyoming land. You never know. I almost laughed. It's worth $5,000. Maybe, she agreed. But it's yours, free and clear. Nobody can take that from you. The apartment looked smaller every time I came home. I'd moved in 2 months earlier, after spending 6 weeks at Emily's. It was all I could afford while I waited for the settlement to come through. $950 a month for 650 square feet in a complex that smelled like old carpet and someone else's cooking. I'd used $18,000 from my share for first month, last month, security deposit, and to buy my Honda back from the estate. Another $3,000 for Patricia's final bill. That left me $289,000 in the bank, but I couldn't touch most of it. I needed that for a house someday. For now, I had this: beige walls, laminate floors, a kitchen so small I couldn't open the refrigerator and the oven at the same time. I'd bought furniture from IKEA, my first time ever assembling anything myself. The bookshelf listed slightly to the left. I'd stopped trying to fix it. I dropped my purse on the counter and pulled out the paperwork Patricia had given me. The final divorce decree, signed by the judge. Official. There was a separate document stapled to it. The deed to the Wyoming property. Patricia had made sure that went through properly. The land was mine, free and clear. No joint ownership. No claims from Rick. 180 acres of worthless dirt. I pulled up the photos on my phone. I'd driven out there once, right after Dad died. It was exactly what Daniel Foster had described. Sagebrush, rocks, dirt. No buildings, no water I could see. No road, just a dirt track that ended a quarter-mile from the property line. You had to hike in the rest of the way. The wind had been brutal that day. My hair had whipped into my face. I'd stood there thinking, this is what you left me, Dad. This is my inheritance. I felt guilty the second I thought it. Dad had done his best. He'd bought that land in 1974, 50 years ago, back when Wyoming dirt was cheap, and he'd had dreams of maybe building a cabin someday. But life got busy. Mom got sick breast cancer, 4 years of treatment before she died when I was 23. He never made it back out to Wyoming. Still, he'd left the land to me in his will, not to Emily, who'd been his favorite in some ways. To me. For Carolyn, the will said, my smart girl, she'll know what to do with it. Except I didn't. I couldn't sell it for $5,000. That wouldn't even cover the realtor's commission. I couldn't build on it, no utilities, no water, no access. I couldn't do anything with it. So it just sat there, worthless. I poured myself a glass of wine, cheap Trader Joe's red, $4.99, stood at my tiny kitchen window. From here, I could see the parking lot and the dumpster and a chain-link fence. Through the fence, I could just barely make out the mountains in the distance. I used to have a view of those mountains from my bedroom. The real bedroom, in the real house, with the king-size bed and the walk-in closet. Now I had this. My phone buzzed. Emily, how'd it go? I stared at the screen. How did you summarize losing most of everything? How did you explain what it felt like to sit in a courtroom and watch your entire life get divided up like poker chips? With you getting the smaller stack. How did you explain that everyone laughed when the only thing you got to keep besides the money was something nobody else wanted? I typed, it's done. Got $310,000 plus alimony for 3 years. Could be worse. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. That's actually not bad, Carrie. You can buy a small house. Maybe go back to school. Start over. Start over at 42. After 15 years out of the workforce. Yeah, maybe. Want me to come over? I almost said yes. Almost asked her to sit with me. To tell me this was going to be okay. But Emily had her own life. Her own husband Tom. Her own kids, 2 girls, younger than mine. Her own problems. And honestly, I didn't want her pity. I'd had enough pity today in that courtroom. I'm fine. Talk tomorrow. I turned off my phone. The apartment was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator, and the distant sound of someone's TV through the wall. I sat down on my IKEA couch, one cushion already sagging, and looked at the divorce decree again. Caroline Louise Winters versus Richard James Winters, dissolution of marriage, final decree, except I wasn't Caroline Winters anymore. I was just Caroline. Carrie, 42 years old, soon to be re-entering the workforce somehow. $310,000 to my name, plus $3,000 a month for 3 years. And 180 acres of worthless land. I thought about Rick's laugh. The way his head had tipped back. The way Daniel Foster had smirked. The way Alyssa had examined her nails like none of this mattered, because to her, it probably didn't. She'd won. She got Rick, and Rick got the house and the life. I took a long drink of wine. The thing is, I didn't want Rick back. I'd figured that out months ago, somewhere between finding the texts and signing the separation papers. The affair with Alyssa had been going on for 2 years before I'd discovered it. 2 years of working late and client dinners and coming home smelling like perfume that wasn't mine. When I'd confronted him, he'd actually seemed relieved. Like he'd been waiting for me to find out, so he didn't have to keep pretending. I love her, Carrie, he'd said. Simple as that. Like our 18 years together were just ... over. Finished. Time to move on. So no, I didn't want him back. But I wanted something. I wanted the life I'd been promised. the partnership we'd agreed to, the security of knowing that raising children and managing a home and supporting a spouse's career had value beyond $310,000, and 3 years of temporary alimony. I wanted the court to have said, "Yes, Mrs. Winters, your contributions mattered. They mattered just as much as his income." But the court hadn't said that. The court had said, "Financial contributions outweigh domestic contributions." And everyone had laughed when the only thing I got to really keep, with no strings, was 180 acres of dirt. I finished the wine and went to bed. The sheets were cheap. Target clearance. They didn't feel like home. Nothing did anymore. 3 years is a long time to build a new life from scratch. Long enough that the sharp edges of anger wear down into something duller. Something you can live with. I learned to carry it. The first year was survival mode. I used $85,000 of my settlement for a down payment on a small townhouse in Lakewood. 20 minutes from the kids' schools, 30 from downtown Denver, 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, 1,100 square feet. The mortgage was $1,850 a month. But with the $3,000 alimony coming in, I could manage, barely. The rest of the settlement money, about $205,000 after the down payment and moving costs, went into a savings account that I tried not to touch. That was my safety net, my future. My what if the alimony runs out and I can't find work fund. Because finding work was harder than I'd expected. 15 years out of the advertising industry meant my skills were outdated. InDesign had replaced Quark Express. Social media was now half the job. The agencies I'd worked with in my 20s didn't exist anymore, or didn't remember me. I applied to 43 positions that first year. Got 2 interviews. No offers. The gap in your resume is concerning, one hiring manager had said, trying to be kind about it. Can you speak to what you were doing during that time? Raising my children. Managing a household. Supporting my husband's career. Right, of course. But in terms of professional development, ... double quotes, there was no good answer to that. Emily suggested I go back to school. Get a teaching certificate, she'd said over coffee one Saturday. You're great with kids. You volunteered at Michael and Sarah's schools for years. It's stable, has benefits, and the schedule works with being a mom. She wasn't wrong. So one enrolled at Metro State for a post-baccalaureate teacher certification program. 12 months, mostly evening and weekend classes, so I could work part-time during the day. I took a job at Target, $15.50 an hour, 25 hours a week to keep money coming in while the alimony covered the mortgage. Michael was 17 by then. Sarah was 14. They split time between my townhouse and Rick's house, the house that used to be ours, on a 50/50th custody schedule that looked fair on paper but felt anything but. Because their 2 homes weren't equal. At Rick's, they had their old bedrooms with all their stuff. They had the pool, the big kitchen, the game room in the basement. They had restaurant dinners and new phones when theirs broke, and ski trips to Vail. At my place, they shared the second bedroom that was barely big enough for 2 twin beds. We ate a lot of pasta and chicken thighs. The cheap cuts. When Michael's iPhone screen cracked, I made him wait 2 months until I could afford the repair. I tried not to feel guilty about it. Sarah never complained. She was good about that, helping with dishes, doing her homework at the kitchen table without being asked, telling me she liked my cooking even when it was just spaghetti again. But Michael struggled. Why can't we just stay at Dad's during the week? He'd asked one night during his junior year. It's closer to school. And I have more space for my stuff. I'd been washing dishes. My hands went still in the soapy water. Because you have 2 parents, I'd said carefully. And I want time with you. I know, but ... double quotes, he'd trailed off. 17 years old, and trying to figure out how to tell his mother that her house wasn't as nice as his father's. It's just easier there. It was easier there. I knew that. But easier meant I'd see my kids less. It meant admitting that I couldn't provide the same life Rick could. It meant losing even more. Let's stick with the schedule for now, I'd said. Okay, he'd shrugged. Okay. But I'd seen him text Rick right after. Seen the way he'd looked around my small kitchen with something like disappointment. That hurt worse than the courtroom laughter. I got my teaching certificate in August, 15 months after the divorce. By September, I had a job offer, third grade teacher at Meadowbrook Elementary, $48,000 a year, plus benefits. Not great money, but steady. And I'd loved it immediately. The kids, the routine, the sense of purpose. I was good at it too, patient, creative, the kind of teacher who stayed late to decorate bulletin boards and spent weekends planning lessons. My classroom became my refuge. 23 8-year-olds who didn't care about divorce settlements or which parent had the bigger house. They cared about whether they could have extra recess and if I'd read another chapter of Charlotte's Web before lunch. I loved them for it. But then I'd drive home, past the Starbucks where I used to stop every morning, $5.75 for a grande latte, back when that felt like nothing. Past the salon where I used to get my hair done every 6 weeks. Past the neighborhood where Rick still lived. I drove past that house more than I should have. Not every day, but enough. Enough to see Alyssa's car in the driveway, a white BMW X3 that was probably a gift from Rick. Enough to see them working in the garden I'd planted. Enough to torture myself with glimpses of the life I'd lost. One evening in late summer year 2 I drove past and saw them. Rick and Alyssa, sitting on the back patio through the fence. She was laughing at something he'd said. He was grilling steaks on the Weber I'd bought him for Father's Day 7 years earlier. Michael was there too. My son, 17, sitting at the patio table with them like they were a family. I should have kept driving. Instead, I pulled over 2 houses down and watched. Michael said something I couldn't hear. Rick laughed, reached over and squeezed his shoulder the way he used to when Michael was little, and said something clever. My chest felt tight. I wanted to be angry. Wanted to hate Rick for moving on so completely, for replacing me so easily, for giving Alyssa the life we'd built together. But watching him with Michael, I saw something else. He was trying. The way he leaned in when Michael talked. The way he'd put down his beer to give Michael his full attention. He'd been a good father when we were married, boozy, distracted sometimes, but present when it mattered. He was still that father. And suddenly I hated myself for resenting that. For wanting him to be worse at this, so I could feel better about losing. I drove home and called Emily. I'm stuck, I told her. I'm stuck being angry at Rick for being happy, and I hate it. I don't want him back, Em. I really don't, but I want him to. I don't know. Suffer, miss what we had, something, that's normal, she'd said gently. You're allowed to feel that. It doesn't feel good. Healing doesn't always feel good. She wasn't wrong, but knowing that didn't make it easier. The alimony ended on a Tuesday in November, 3 years and 1 month after the divorce. I'd known it was coming, had been preparing for it. But seeing that last $3,000 deposit hit my account, knowing there wouldn't be another one, felt like losing something all over again. I sat at my kitchen table, the small IKEA one that wobbled if you put your elbows on it wrong, and did the math. Monthly income $4,000 after taxes from teaching, monthly expenses $1,850 mortgage, $180 utilities, $400 groceries, $150 gas, $200 for Michael and Sarah's activities and needs, $100 miscellaneous. Total, $2,880. That left $1,120 a month for everything else. Car repairs, clothes, medical bills, savings. It was tight, really tight. But it was sustainable. I'd done the budget 10 times to make sure. I wasn't going to be comfortable. But I wasn't going to drown either. I'd survived. I saw Rick at Michael's high school graduation that May. He was there with Alyssa, sitting 3 rows ahead of me. She was wearing a sundress that probably cost more than my mortgage payment. He'd put his arm around her during the ceremony. The way he used to put his arm around me at Sarah's elementary school concerts. When Michael walked across the stage, we both stood up and cheered. For a moment, we were just 2 parents proud of their son. After the ceremony, in the parking lot, Rick approached me. Alyssa stayed by their car giving us space. I realized that was thoughtful of her. I hated that it was thoughtful of her. He did good, Rick said. He did. Full ride to CU engineering scholarship. That's huge. It is. I'd cried when Michael got that letter. Cried because I was proud, but also because it meant I wouldn't have to figure out how to pay for college. Rick looked at me. Really looked at me. You okay, Carrie? I mean, really okay? I almost said yes automatically. Almost gave him the easy answer. But something in his face, concern maybe, or guilt, made me pause. I'm okay, I said finally. I'm not where I thought I'd be at 45, but I'm okay. He nodded slowly. I know the divorce was hard. I know I didn't make it easier. No, you didn't. I'm sorry about that. I am. I was angry about a lot of things back then. Things that had nothing to do with you. I took that out on you in the settlement, and that wasn't fair. I stared at him. In 3 years, this was the closest he'd come to a real apology. Why were you angry? I asked. He looked away. Toward Michael, who was taking photos with friends. I felt trapped. In the marriage. In my career. In the life we'd built. I blamed you for that. But it wasn't your fault. It was just, life. The choices we'd made together. I couldn't see that then. And Alyssa was an escape. He met my eyes again. I'm not proud of how I handled any of it. The affair, the divorce, the settlement. I could have been kinder. Yes, I said. You could have. Are we? He hesitated. Can we be okay? For the kids. I thought about Michael splitting his time between 2 homes. About Sarah, now 15, who was starting to ask questions about why we'd gotten divorced, what had happened, whose fault it was. We're okay, I said. We're not friends, Rick, but we're okay. He looked relieved. Good, that's good. Alyssa called out to him. Something about needing to leave for the restaurant reservation. I should go, Rick said. But Carrie, you're doing a good job. With the kids. With everything. I see that. He walked away before I could respond. I stood there in the parking lot, watching him go, and felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But something softer than anger. Something like acceptance. The call came on a Tuesday in late September, 3 years and 10 months after the divorce. I was grading spelling tests during my lunch break when my phone rang. Unknown number, Wyoming area code. I almost didn't answer. Is this Caroline Winters? Speaking, Ms. Winters. My name is Thomas Brennan. I'm a land surveyor working for Laramie County. I'm calling about a property you own in eastern Wyoming. About 40 minutes outside Cheyenne. 180 acres. I set down my red pen. Yes, I inherited that from my father. Right? Well, ma'am. I was doing a routine survey for the county. We're updating all our property records and maps. Part of a big infrastructure project. I came across your parcel and found some things you should probably know about. My heart started beating faster. What kind of things? For starters, your property has water rights. Underground aquifer runs directly beneath your land. Substantial one, too. Now, those rights weren't on the original deed from when your father bought the land in 1974. But I found paperwork showing he filed for them back in 1976. Looks like the county records office lost the application. And it just got approved and filed last month when we were digitizing old documents. I stood up. The teacher's lounge suddenly felt too small. Wait, water rights. You're sure? Yes, ma'am. County confirmed it. They're yours. Retroactive to 1976. He paused. That's not all. Your property sits right along what's about to become a pretty major development corridor. Wyoming's been working on expanding fiber optic infrastructure across the eastern plains. Those lines are being run right now. They'll pass within a quarter mile of your property line. And there's a new power substation going in about 2 miles north of you. My mouth went dry. What does that mean? Well, I'm not a real estate appraiser, so I can't give you a number. But generally speaking, land with confirmed water access, proximity to high-speed internet infrastructure, and nearby power tends to be worth substantially more than land without those things. I thought about the $5,000 assessment from the divorce, about Daniel Foster's smirk, about Rick's laugh. How much more? I asked. Like I said, I can't give you a number, but you might want to talk to a commercial real estate attorney. There's been some buzz lately about tech companies looking to build in eastern Wyoming. Data centers, server farms. They need exactly what you've got: water for cooling systems, fiber optics for data transmission, power infrastructure nearby. I couldn't breathe. Ms. Winters, you still there? I'm here, I managed. Thank you. Thank you for calling. You bet. I'll send you copies of the updated survey and the water rights documentation. Should have it to you by end of week. Take care now. He hung up. I sat there in the teacher's lounge, surrounded by half-eaten lunches and coffee mugs and a bulletin board covered in student artwork, and I felt something I hadn't felt in almost 4 years. Hope, real hope. Sarah Chen's office didn't look like the kind of place that changed lives. It was on the 3rd floor of a modest building in downtown Denver, sandwiched between a dentist's office and an accounting firm. The waiting room had generic landscape art on the walls and magazines from 6 months ago. Nothing like Daniel Foster's office, which had been all glass and chrome and mountain views. But Patricia, my legal aid attorney from the divorce, had given me Sarah's name when I'd called her. Panicked, the day after Thomas Brennan's call. She's good, Patricia had said. Specializes in commercial property. She'll do a free initial consultation. And she won't charge you anything unless there's actually a deal to be made. I needed that, because even after almost 4 years of careful budgeting, I still couldn't afford a retainer. Sarah came out to greet me herself. She was maybe 40, with black hair pulled back in a ponytail and glasses that kept sliding down her nose. She wore slacks and a blazer that had seen better days, but her handshake was firm and her smile was genuine. She looked like someone who worked hard. Someone who understood what it meant to build something from nothing. I liked her immediately. Ms. Winters. She gestured down the hallway. Come on back. Her office was small but organized. File folders stacked neatly on the desk. A laptop covered in stickers, Colorado flag, a hiking trail marker, something that said nevertheless. She persisted. Behind her, a window overlooked the street. Not a mountain view, but honest. So, Sarah sat down and pulled out a legal pad. Patricia said you have property in Wyoming that might be more valuable than you thought. Tell me about it. I handed her the folder I'd prepared. The deed from my father. The original $5,000 assessment from the divorce. The survey documents Thomas Brennan had sent. The newly discovered water rights paperwork dated from 1976 but filed just last month. She read through everything slowly. I watched her face. Watched her eyebrows go up slightly. Watched her make notes on her legal pad. Finally, she looked up. Ms. Winters, this is interesting. Water rights, proximity to new infrastructure. But I need to manage your expectations here. Just because the land has these features doesn't automatically mean it's worth millions. My stomach dropped. Thomas said tech companies were looking to build. They are, but we need to do this properly. First step is getting the property professionally appraised by someone who specializes in commercial land, not the basic residential assessment you got during your divorce. She made another note. I have contacts in Wyoming who can do that. It'll cost about $2,500. I felt my face go pale. I don't have aisle fronted, she said. We'll structure my fee as a percentage of any sale. If nothing comes of this, you don't owe me anything except reimbursement for the appraisal. Does that work? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Good. Give me 2 weeks. I'll get the appraisal done. Do some research on comparable sales in the area. See what kind of development is actually happening in eastern Wyoming. Then we'll talk about whether you have something worth pursuing. The 2 weeks felt endless. I went to work every day. Taught my 3rd graders about multiplication tables and the water cycle. Smiled at parents during drop-off. Graded papers. But inside, I was screaming. Every night, I went home and Googled everything I could find about Wyoming real estate. Data centers, infrastructure development. I read articles about tech companies expanding into less populated states for tax breaks and cheaper land. I looked at satellite images of my property and tried to see what they might see. I didn't tell anyone. Not Emily, not the kids, not even Patricia. Because what if Sarah called back and said the appraisal came in at $50,000 or $100,000? Those would be life-changing numbers for someone living paycheck to paycheck on a teacher's salary. But they weren't vindication, they weren't justice. And I was surprised to realize how badly I wanted justice. Not revenge, exactly, but I wanted Rick to know. I wanted Daniel Foster to know. I wanted everyone who'd laughed in that courtroom to understand that they'd been wrong. So I waited. Sarah called on a Thursday afternoon, exactly 15 days after our meeting. I was in my classroom, putting up new student artwork. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I saw her name, and my heart stopped. I stepped into the hallway. Sarah, Ms. Winters, I have the appraisal back. Her voice was calm, professional, and I've done extensive research on the area. Are you somewhere you can talk? Yes, tell me. The commercial appraisal values your property at $1.8 million. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor. $1.8 million. Not $5,000. Not $50,000. $1.8 million. Ms. Winters, you still there? I'm here, I whispered. Now, that's the baseline value based on the land, water rights, and proximity to infrastructure. But here's where it gets interesting. I've been making discrete inquiries, and there are at least 3 companies actively looking for sites in eastern Wyoming right now. 2 smaller operation server farms, basically, and 1 major player, Tech Vista Corporation. They're planning an $800 million data center project. They need between 150 and 200 acres with specific requirements. Water access for cooling systems, fiber optic proximity, power infrastructure nearby. Your property is one of only 4 parcels in the region that meets all their criteria. My hands were shaking. What does that mean? It means we might be able to sell for significantly more than the appraised value. But she paused. Here's the thing, this isn't going to be quick. A sale of this magnitude, especially to a company like Tech Vista, will involve months of due diligence, environmental surveys, title searches, negotiations. We're looking at a 6 to 9 month process minimum. How much more than $1.8 million? I can't promise anything. But based on comparable sales for similar situations, I'd estimate we could negotiate anywhere from $3 million to $5 million. Maybe more if we're patient, and if Tech Vista really needs your specific parcel. $3 million to $5 million. I thought about my townhouse, my $48,000 salary, my savings account that had $187,000 left from the settlement money I was terrified to touch. I thought about Michael, now 19 and at CU Boulder, about Sarah, 16 and starting to think about colleges, about how I'd been calculating whether I could afford to help with graduate school someday, or whether they'd have to take loans. I thought about Rick, living in our old house, about Alyssa in her BMW, about Daniel Foster's smirk. What do? I asked. That's up to you. We have options. Option 1. I can reach out to the smaller companies right now. We could probably sell within 60 days for something close to the $1.8 million appraisal. It's fast, it's certain, and it's life-changing money. Or, option 2, we target Tech Vista, play the long game. Its riskier deals can fall through, but the potential payoff is substantially higher. 3 to 5 million, possibly more with good negotiation. I closed my eyes. What would you do? Honestly, I'd wait. You have time. The property isn't costing you anything to hold, and based on my research, Tech Vista really needs what you have. But it's your call, Ms. Winters. This is your life we're talking about. I thought about the past 4 years, the struggle, the humiliation, the slow grind of rebuilding from nothing. I thought about how I'd learned to be patient, to survive on less, to wait for things to get better. I'd already waited for years. I could wait 6 more months. Target Tech Vista, I said. Let's do this right. I told the kids that weekend. Not everything. I didn't want to get their hopes up too high. But they deserved to know something might be changing. I made dinner, actual dinner, not passed a hand, asked them both to sit down with me afterward. Michael was home from Boulder for the weekend. Sarah was at the kitchen table doing homework. They both looked at me warily when I said I needed to talk to them. Is everything okay? Sarah asked immediately. Are you sick? No, nothing like that. I took a breath. Remember the land in Wyoming that Grandpa Jim left me? The land from the divorce. The worthless land Dad laughed about. Michael said, something in his voice protective, maybe, or angry on my behalf, made my chest tight. That land, turns out it might not be so worthless after all. I explained about the water rights, the infrastructure development, the commercial appraisal. I didn't mention specific numbers yet, just said it might be worth significantly more than $5,000. Sarah's eyes went wide. How much more? I don't know yet. It depends on negotiations. But enough to make a real difference. Like, college fund difference. She asked, because I've been looking at schools and they're all like $40,000 a year, and I know that's maybe. I interrupted gently. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Nothing's certain yet. But yes, potentially that kind of difference. Michael leaned back in his chair. Does Dad know? Not yet. And I'm asking you both not to tell him. Not until we have a deal actually signed. Okay. They exchanged a glance. He's going to lose his mind, Michael said. Maybe. He's going to try to claim he should get half, Sarah added. Isn't he? Like, that's how divorce works, right? Everything gets split. The divorce is final, I said. The settlement was based on the property being worth $5,000. If it ends up being worth more, that's just timing. It is what it is. Michael was quiet for a moment. Then, good. He got everything else. You deserve this. I looked at my son, 19 years old, growing up seeing things more clearly than he had at 16. I don't know about deserve, I said. But I'm not going to turn it down. You should ask for millions. Sarah said, make them pay whatever it's actually worth. I smiled. That's the plan. The negotiations started in November. Sarah had made contact with Tech Vista's acquisitions team. They were interested. Very interested. But they wanted to do their due diligence first. Environmental survey. 2 months, making sure there was no contamination, no protected species, nothing that would prevent construction. Title search. 1 month. Confirming I actually owned the property free and clear. No hidden liens or claims. Infrastructure verification. Ongoing. Their engineers needed to confirm the fiber optic lines were going in where the county said they were going in, that the power substation was actually happening. This is normal, Sarah assured me over the phone in early December. They're spending $800 million. They're going to be thorough. How much are we asking? I'm starting at $6.5 million. That's aggressive but defensible, given what they need. I expect them to counter around $3 million. We'll negotiate from there. $6.5 million. Even if we ended up at $3 million, even after taxes. Even after Sarah's I'd have more money than I'd ever imagined having. I tried not to think about it too much. Tried not to spend it in my head. Tried to keep teaching. Keep living my normal life. But late at night, alone in my townhouse, I'd lie in bed and do the math. $3 million after taxes and fees would be roughly $2 million. I could pay off my mortgage, buy a better house, set up college funds for both kids. Maybe even quit teaching or go part-time, at least. I could breathe. For the first time in 4 years, I could actually breathe. The first real offer came in February, 5 months after Thomas Brennan's initial call. Sarah called me on a Tuesday evening. I was making dinner chicken stir-fry, fresh vegetables I'd splurged on because I'd been so anxious about the negotiations that I needed to do something with my hands. They offered $3.2 million, she said. I turned off the stove. That's good, right? It's a good starting point. But I think we can do better. Their environmental survey came back clean. Their engineers confirmed the infrastructure is on schedule. They need your land, Ms. Winters. They don't have a good alternative. So we counter. We counter at $5.8 million. I know that sounds crazy, but hear me out. The project is worth $800 million. If we're one of the only suitable sites, they'll pay a premium to avoid delays. $3 million is too low. My heart was pounding. What if they walk away? Then we go to one of the smaller companies and take $1.8 million. You're not losing anything by trying. She was right. I knew she was right. But it still felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Okay, I said. Counter at $5.8 million. They came back 2 weeks later at $4.1 million. Sarah countered at $5.2 million. They went to $4.6 million. We held firm at $5 million. And on March 15th, almost exactly 4 years after my divorce was finalized, Tech Vista Corporation agreed to purchase 180 acres of worthless Wyoming land for $5 million. Sarah called me at school. I was in the middle of a lesson about fractions. We have a deal, she said. $5 million. They want to close in 60 days. Are you ready? I looked at my classroom. At the 23 third graders, watching me with curious faces, waiting for me to continue the lesson. I'm ready, I said. The news leaked 3 weeks before closing. I should have expected it. $5 million doesn't stay quiet, even when you're trying to keep it that way. Someone at the county recorder's office must have talked, or maybe someone at Tech Vista. Sarah said these things happen. Real estate deals this size attract attention, especially in smaller communities. The first article appeared in the Wyoming Business Report on a Tuesday morning. Tech Vista finalizes $800 million data center project with $5 million land acquisition in eastern Wyoming. The article didn't name me, just said private landowner and 180-acre parcel near Cheyenne. But anyone who knew about my father's land and bothered to look up the property records could figure it out. Emily called me at 7 a.m., crying, "Carrie, oh my God, Carrie. Tell me this is you." I was getting ready for school. I'd been so focused on the closing reading and rereading the purchase agreement, making lists of what I'd need to do with the money, that I hadn't thought about how the news might spread. How did you? Tom saw it on LinkedIn. Some guy from his firm who does real estate law shared the article, and Tom remembered you had land in Wyoming, and he looked up the address, and she was talking so fast I could barely follow. Is it real? $5 million. My stomach dropped. Emily, you can't tell anyone. Not until the sale closes. Not until the money is actually in my account. I know. Tom made me promise. But Carrie, her voice broke. You did it. After everything. You actually did it. The sale hasn't closed yet. Anything could still. It's going to happen. I can feel it. And you deserve this. You deserve all of it. We talked for a few more minutes before I had to get to school. She promised again not to tell anyone. But I knew how these things worked. Tom would tell his closest colleague in confidence. That colleague would tell his wife. The wife would tell her sister. Within a week, half of Denver's professional class would know, which meant Rick would know. I just hoped I'd have time to tell him myself first. He called me that afternoon. I was on my lunch break, eating a turkey sandwich in my classroom and trying to focus on grading, when my phone rang. Unknown number. Denver area code. I knew it was him before I answered. Hello, Carrie. His voice was tight, controlled. We need to talk. Rick, is it true? The Wyoming land, $5 million. I set down my red pen. How did you hear? Daniel called me. One of his colleagues saw the article and recognized the property from our divorce records. He wanted to give me a heads up in case ... double quotes. He trailed off. Is it true? I could lie, stall, tell him I didn't know what he was talking about. But we'd been married for 18 years. I owed him honesty, even if he hadn't always given me the same. Yes, I said. It's true. Silence on the other end. Long enough that I thought he might have hung up. $5 million, he finally said. His voice was different now, quieter. For the land we all laughed about. The land, Daniel said, was worth maybe $5,000. It was worth 5,000. 4 years ago, before they discovered the water rights. Before the infrastructure development. Before TechVista needed exactly what that land offers. When did you find out? Last September. A county surveyor called me. September, 6 months ago. I could hear him doing the math. You've known for 6 months and you didn't tell me. Why would I tell you, Rick? We're divorced. The settlement is final. That land is mine. I know that. I'm not. He stopped. Took a breath. I'm not trying to take it from you. I know I don't have any legal claim. Daniel already confirmed that. I just, I can't believe I let you walk away with $5 million. You didn't let me walk away with anything. You fought for everything else in the divorce. The house, most of the savings, the retirement accounts. You left me with $310,000 and land you thought was worthless. Because it was worthless. Everyone said it was worthless. Everyone was wrong. Another long silence. Can we meet? He asked. Not with lawyers. Just you and me. I need to talk to you about this face to face. Every instinct told me to say no. To tell him we had nothing to discuss, that the divorce was done and this was my life now. But something in his voice, something broken and desperate, made me pause. Coffee, I said. Thursday at 4 o'clock. That place on Colfax near the bookstore. Thank you, he said quietly. I'll see you then. I told Sarah about the call that evening. He wants to meet. She sounded concerned. Carrie, you don't have to do that. You don't owe him anything. I know, but he's the father of my children. And he said he's not trying to contest the sale. What he says and what he does might be different things. Let me be clear. He has no legal standing to challenge this. The settlement was fair based on the information available at the time. The appreciation in value happened after the divorce was finalized. You inherited that land. It was never marital property. I understand. If he brings a lawyer to that coffee meeting, he won't. If he records the conversation, trying to get you to admit you knew about the value earlier, Sarah, I know what I'm doing. I just need to have this conversation. For closure, maybe. I don't know. She sighed. Fine. But call me right after, and don't agree to anything. Not even let me think about it. If he asks for money, if he asks for anything, you tell him you need to discuss it with your attorney. I will. But I knew Rick wouldn't ask for money. He'd ask for something worse. He'd ask me to understand. Thursday afternoon, I walked into the coffee shop at 3:55. Rick was already there. Sitting at a corner table, 2 cups of coffee in front of him. He stood up when he saw me. I got you a latte, he said. Grande, extra shot. I remember. I sat down, wrapped my hands around the cup without drinking it. He looked older than I remembered. Lines around his eyes that hadn't been there during the divorce. Gray in his hair at the temples. His suit was nice but not new. I recognized it from 2 years ago. You look good, Carrie, he said. Thank you. Teaching suits you. Michael says you're really happy there. I didn't respond. Just waited. He took a sip of his coffee, set it down, stared at it like he might find the right words at the bottom of the cup. I made a mistake, he finally said. 4 years ago. Several mistakes, actually, but the biggest one was underestimating you. Rick, let me finish. Please. He looked up at me. When we got divorced, I told myself I was being fair, that I'd earned most of that money through my career, and you'd, I don't know, been along for the ride, I guess. That's how I justified taking everything. You didn't take everything. I got $310,000. You got scraps. You got what I didn't want. And the land god. The land. I laughed at that land. We all did. Daniel made jokes about it for weeks after the settlement. My hands tightened around the coffee cup. You want to know something? Rick continued. I've been thinking about that day a lot this week. About how you looked sitting there in that courtroom. You wore that Ann Taylor dress you'd had forever. You didn't say anything when Daniel talked about the land. You just sat there and took it. What else was I supposed to do? Fight? Scream? Tell us we were wrong? Something? He shook his head. But you didn't. You just accepted it. And I thought that meant you agreed. That you knew the land was worthless too. I did know it was worthless. Back then, I know. I know that now. Daniel pulled all the records, the assessment, the surveys, everything. There was no way you could have known about the water rights or the infrastructure development. It really was just timing. He leaned back in his chair. But that doesn't make this any easier to swallow. I took a sip of coffee. It was exactly how I liked it. That made this conversation somehow worse. What do you want, Rick? Why did you ask me here? He was quiet for a long moment. I want to know if you're going to help me understand how to live with this. Because right now, I wake up every morning and think about how I had a chance to be generous in the divorce, and I chose to be petty instead. And that choice cost me $5 million. It didn't cost you anything. That money was never yours. It could have been, if I'd been a better person. If I'd fought for a truly equal split instead of taking everything I could get. He met my eyes. If I'd treated you the way you deserved to be treated after 18 years of marriage. I felt something crack in my chest. Not anger, not satisfaction. Guilt. Don't do this, I said quietly. Do what? Make me feel bad for having good luck. Make me feel guilty for winning something you lost. I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. I'm trying to tell you I'm sorry. For the affair. For the divorce. For the settlement. For all of it. His voice cracked slightly. I'm trying to tell you that you deserved better than what I gave you, and now the universe is proving me right in the most expensive way possible. I stared at him. This man I'd loved for 18 years. This man who'd betrayed me, divorced me, taken almost everything in the settlement. This man who was sitting across from me now, genuinely sorry, 4 years too late. I don't know what to say to that. I finally managed. You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know. He took another sip of coffee. Michael told me you're handling this really well. That you're being smart about the money. Planning for the future. I'm proud of you for that. You're proud of me. I know I don't have the right to be, but I am. We sat in silence for a moment. Are you okay? I asked. Financially, I mean. You and Alyssa. He looked surprised by the question. We're fine. I'm still at Morrison Blake, still making good money. The house is expensive, but manageable. Alyssa's working now. She's a paralegal supervisor, making decent money herself. She seems nice, I said. And meant it, surprisingly. The few times I've seen her with the kids, she's been appropriate. She is nice. She's not you, but she's good for me, I think. She doesn't let me get away with shit the way you did. I almost smiled at that. I let you get away with too much. You did, and I took advantage of that. He paused. For what it's worth, she told me not to contest the sale. Said I made my bed, and now I have to lie in it. Smart woman. Smarter than me, apparently. We finished our coffee in silence. When we stood up to leave, Rick reached out and touched my arm. Carrie, I really am sorry. About everything. I looked at him, at the gray in his hair, the lines around his eyes, the genuine regret in his face, and I felt the last bit of anger drain away. I know, I said. I believe you. Can I ask you one thing? What? Are you happy? Really happy? I thought about my townhouse, my classroom, my third graders who didn't care about money or divorce settlements. I thought about Michael and Sarah, growing into good humans despite their parents' mistakes. I thought about $5 million that would close in 3 weeks. I'm getting there, I said. I think I'm finally getting there. Michael called me that night. Dad told me about the coffee meeting. He said, "Are you okay?" I'm fine. It was actually good, I think. We talked. Really talked. He's been weird this week, since he found out about the land. He's not angry. Exactly. More like sad. That's understandable. Is it true you're getting $5 million? I hesitated. That's what the sale price is. After taxes and fees, it'll be closer to $3.5 million. But yes. Holy shit, Mom. Michael, no, seriously. Holy shit. That's incredible. He was quiet for a moment. Dad asked me if I thought he should have gotten half of that. Like, morally, not legally. My stomach tightened. What did you tell him? I told him no. I told him he got the house and most of the money in both cars, and you got a townhouse and land everyone thought was garbage. I told him you both took a risk on how the land would turn out, and he lost and you won. That's how it works. I felt tears prick my eyes. Thank you for saying that. It's true. He knows it's true. He's just having a hard time accepting it. Michael paused. But Mom, even though he's sad about it, I think part of him is glad you won. Does that make sense? It does, I said softly. It actually does. The article in the Denver Post came out 2 days later. Local teacher inherits fortune. Wyoming land sale nets millions. They'd found the story. Interviewed Thomas Brennan, who talked about discovering the water rights. Mentioned TechVista's $800 million project. Got a quote from a real estate expert saying the sale was an extraordinary example of timing and luck. They didn't quote MIT, declined to comment, but they quoted Sarah Ms. Winters is grateful for this unexpected turn of events and looks forward to using the proceeds to secure her family's future. I read the article 3 times, waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for them to mention the divorce, or Rick, or Daniel Foster's courtroom jokes. But they didn't. It was just a feel-good story about a teacher who got lucky. Emily called immediately. You're famous. I don't want to be famous. Too late. This is going to be everywhere. Single mom, teacher, inherited worthless land that turned out to be worth millions. This is like a Hallmark movie. She wasn't wrong. By the end of the week, I'd gotten calls from 3 Denver news stations wanting interviews. A producer from a morning show in New York. Someone from a podcast about unexpected windfalls. I declined them all. This wasn't a story. This was my life, and I wanted to live it quietly. 3 weeks later, on May 2nd, the sale closed. I sat in Sarah's office and signed 47 pages of documents. Wire transfer authorizations, tax forms, deed transfers, acknowledgments of receipt. Sarah's assistant notarized everything. The closing agent from TechVista shook my hand. Sarah smiled and said, "Congratulations, Ms. Winters. You're a wealthy woman." The money hit my account at 2:17 p.m. $5 million. 0 minus Sarah's 6% fee. $300,000 minus capital gains tax held less than 1 year. $1,190,000 minus closing costs and fees. $18,000 net proceeds. $3,492,000.00. I stared at the number on my phone. $3.49 million. More money than my parents had made in their entire lives combined. More money than I'd ever imagined having. More money than I knew what to do with. Sarah was talking about financial advisors and estate planning and investment strategies, but I barely heard her. All I could think was, I did it. I actually did it. I'd survived the divorce, survived the poverty, survived 4 years of rebuilding from nothing, and now I had this, not because I'd planned it, not because I'd been smart or strategic, because I'd held on to the one thing nobody else wanted, because I'd been patient, because I'd been lucky, because my father had bought 180 acres of Wyoming dirt 50 years ago and filed paperwork for water rights that got lost in a county records office for 47 years, because sometimes, just sometimes, the universe got it right. 6 months after the sale closed, I bought a house. Not a mansion, not even close to the house Rick and I had shared during our marriage. But it was mine, and it was beautiful. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, 2,100 square feet in Littleton. Hardwood floors. A kitchen with enough counter space to actually cook. A backyard with a garden where I could plant vegetables. Windows that let in morning light. And a view of the mountains. I'd paid $650,000 cash. No mortgage. No debt. Just a house that was completely, entirely mine. The rest of the money, about $2.8 million after the house and moving costs, sat in carefully structured accounts managed by the financial advisor Sarah had connected me with. College funds for Michael and Sarah. Retirement accounts. Investment portfolios designed for steady growth with moderate risk. Whatever that meant, I'd kept $100,000 in accessible savings. Emergency money. Breathe easy money. For the first time in 4 years, I could breathe easy. But I'd also kept my teaching job. Everyone had asked me why. Emily, the kids. Even my principal, who'd called me into her office the week after the news broke. Carrie, I want you to know we'd love to keep you on staff, she'd said carefully. But I'd understand if you wanted to. Pursue other opportunities. Travel. Spend time with family. I want to stay, I'd told her. Maybe drop to part-time if that's possible. 3 days a week instead of 5. She'd looked relieved. We can make that work. So I'd kept teaching. Tuesday through Thursday, 3rd grade, same classroom. 23 new students who didn't know or care that their teacher was technically a millionaire. They just knew Ms. Winters read really good books and gave out extra recess when they worked hard. I loved them for that. On my days off, I gardened. Read books I'd been meaning to read for years. Took Sarah shopping for college visits. She was a junior now, looking at schools. Drove up to Boulder to have lunch with Michael, who was thriving in engineering school. I'd offered to help him with expenses. You have the scholarship, but if you need anything, rent money, food, books, just ask. He'd hugged me. Thanks, Mom. I'm good for now. But it's nice to know I don't have to worry. That's what the money had bought me. Not luxury, not revenge, just the absence of worry. I saw Rick at Sarah's high school graduation in May. He was there with Alyssa, sitting 4 rows ahead of me like always. But this time, when the ceremony ended, Alyssa came over first. Carrie, she extended her hand. I don't think we've ever actually been introduced properly. I'm Alyssa. I shook her hand, surprised. I know who you are. I know this is awkward, but I wanted to say congratulations. On the land sale, that was incredible. Thank you. And I wanted to say I'm sorry for how everything happened 4 years ago. The affair, the divorce. I know I was part of causing you pain, and I regret that. I stared at her. She was maybe 33 now, pretty polished, but with a nervousness in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because Rick's been beating himself up about the divorce for months now, ever since he found out about the money. And I think part of him can't move forward until he knows you're okay. So I wanted to see for myself. Are you okay? I thought about my house, my job, my kids, my garden, where tomatoes were just starting to ripen. I'm okay, I said. I really am. She looked relieved. Good, that's good. She glanced back at Rick, who was talking to Sarah. He's not a bad person, you know. He made bad choices. But he's trying to be better. I know, I said. And I did. I'd seen it in the coffee shop. Seen it in how he was with the kids. Seen it in the fact that he hadn't contested the sale, even though it must have killed him not to. He asked me if I was with him for the money. Alyssa said quietly. After he found out about your $5 million, he wanted to know if I'd leave him now that he'd lost that much. What did you tell him? I told him I made $70,000 a year as a paralegal supervisor. I didn't need his money. I needed him to stop treating his life like a competition and start actually living it. She smiled slightly. He's working on that. Rick approached then, Sarah in tow. Mom, can we all go to dinner together? Sarah asked. Me, you, Dad, and Alyssa. Like a normal family. I saw the hope in her eyes. Saw Rick's careful neutrality. Saw Alyssa's encouraging nod. Sure, I said. Let's do that. We went to a nice Italian place in Cherry Creek. Not fancy, but nice. The kind of place where you could have a conversation without shouting over music. Sarah talked about college plans. She wanted to study environmental science, maybe work on climate policy someday. Michael had driven down from Boulder and met us there, immediately ordering the most expensive thing on the menu with a grin. What? He said when I raised an eyebrow. Dad's paying, right? Rick laughed. Yes, I'm paying. Order whatever you want. It was strange, sitting at a table with Rick and his girlfriend. No, his partner. They'd been together for 5 years, no, and having it feel almost normal, not comfortable, exactly, but not hostile either. How's Morris and Blake? I asked Rick at one point. Good, busy. I made partner last year, Actually, congratulations. Thanks. It's been good. More stability, better salary. I'm pulling in about $420,000 now. He said it matter-of-factly, not bragging. Just stating a fact. I did the mental math. In the 5 years since our divorce, he'd made over $1.8 million in salary. He had the house, which had probably appreciated to over $1 million. He had his retirement accounts. He had Alyssa's income on top of his dot. He was doing fine, not as well as me, with my sudden windfall, but fine. That's great, I said. I'm happy for you. He looked at me like he was trying to figure out if I meant it. I am, I added. I'm not happy about how we got here. But I'm happy you're doing well. You're doing better. He said quietly. I got lucky. You got what you deserved. He took a sip of wine. I've been thinking a lot about that. About deserve. I told myself I deserved the bigger share in the divorce because I'd earned more money. But you'd earned things too. Just not things the law knows how to value. Alyssa touched his hand. A small gesture, but I saw the support in it. You did earn things, I said. You built a career, supported a family. That matters too. But not more than what you did. No, I agreed. Not more, just different. Sarah looked between us, something like relief on her face. Michael was focused on his pasta, but I saw him smile slightly. We finished dinner, split a dessert, talked about normal things: Sarah's college visits, Michael's engineering project, my garden. When we left, Rick pulled me aside in the parking lot. Thank you, he said, for doing this, for being gracious about everything. I'm not being gracious, I'm just being honest. We're both doing okay. That's enough. Is it enough? I thought about it. Yes, I think it is. He looked like he wanted to say something else. But Alyssa called out that they needed to go early morning tomorrow. Take care, Carrie, he said. You too, Rick. I watched them drive away in his Lexus, the same one from the divorce, now 5 years old, but still nice. Watched Sarah get in Michael's car to drive back to my house. Watched them all go back to their lives, and I went back to mine, in July. I drove out to Wyoming one last time. The land had officially transferred to Tech Vista in June. They were breaking ground on the data center in August. But I wanted to see it one more time before it changed forever. I drove out on a Saturday morning, the same route I'd taken 5 years ago, right after Dad died. The same dirt road that ended a quarter mile from the property line. The same hike in the rest of the way. It looked exactly the same. Sagebrush, rocks, dirt, stretching out forever under an endless sky. But it wasn't the same. There were survey markers now. Orange flags marking where construction would start. A temporary fence along the northern boundary. Signs warning about future construction zones. In 6 months, this would be a massive building. Servers, cooling systems, technology worth hundreds of millions. But right now, it was still just dirt. I stood there for a long time, hands in my pockets, wind whipping my hair around my face. Thank you, Dad. I said out loud. I thought about him buying this land in 1974, 50 years ago, paying maybe a few $100s for it, filing for water rights and never knowing they'd been approved, holding on to it for decades, thinking someday he'd build a cabin here. Someday he'd have time. Someday that never came. But he'd left it to me. His smart girl. Had he known? Had he somehow sensed it might be worth something someday? Or had he just wanted me to have a piece of him after he was gone? I'd never know. But I knew this. The land hadn't saved me because it was valuable. It had saved me because I'd held on to it, because I'd been patient, because I'd survived the 4 years it took for its value to reveal itself. The money was just the reward for that patience. The real gift was learning I could survive. I thought about Rick sometimes. About the choices we'd both made. The marriage that had lasted 18 years and produced 2 incredible children. The affair that had ended it. The divorce that had divided everything we'd built. I thought about Daniel Foster holding up that photograph in the courtroom and calling my inheritance worthless. About Rick's laugh echoing off the walls. About how I'd sat there in my 6-year-old dress and felt worthless too. And I thought about how wrong they'd all been. Not about the land. They'd been right about the land, it was worthless back then. But about me, I wasn't worthless. I'd never been worthless. I'd just been undervalued. By Rick. By the court. By a legal system that couldn't quantify the worth of raising children and managing a home and supporting a partner's career. The land hadn't proven my worth. I'd proven my worth by surviving. By going back to school at 42. By learning to live on $48,000 a year. By rebuilding a life from $310,000 and a teaching certificate and 180 acres of dirt nobody wanted. The $3.50 million was wonderful, life-changing, but it wasn't what made me valuable. I'd been valuable all along. It just took me 4 years to see it. 5 years after the sale closed, I'm 51 years old. I still teach part-time at Meadowbrook Elementary. Still live in the house in Littleton with the mountain view. Still garden and read and live quietly. Michael graduated from CU Boulder with honors. He's working for an aerospace company in California, designing components for satellites. He calls every Sunday. Sarah is finishing her junior year at Colorado State, studying environmental science like she planned. She wants to work for the EPA someday, help write policy to protect public lands. The irony isn't lost on me. Rick and Alyssa got married 2 years ago. Small ceremony, just family. I sent a gift, a nice set of wine glasses. Sarah told me they used them at the reception and that Rick had gotten emotional when he opened them. He said it was gracious of you, Sarah reported. Alyssa said it was classy. I'd just wanted them to be happy. Really, genuinely happy. Because I was happy, and I wanted them to have that too. The money sits in accounts, growing slowly. I don't think about it much anymore. It's just there. A safety net I'll probably never need, but am grateful to have. I donated $500,000 to establish a scholarship fund for single mothers returning to school. It's administered through Metro State, where I got my teaching certificate. The first recipient got her award last year, a 38-year-old woman with 3 kids who wanted to become a nurse. I went to the ceremony. Watched her accept the check with tears in her eyes. Saw the hope in her face when she realized she could actually do this. Could actually build a new life. I understood that hope. I'd lived it. Sometimes, late at night, I pull up the photos of the Wyoming land on my phone. The sagebrush, the rocks, the dirt, under that endless sky. It's not there anymore. TechVista finished the data center 18 months ago. It's a massive building now. Gray and industrial, humming with servers and cooling systems and fiber optic cables carrying data across the country. But in my photos, it's still just dirt, worthless dirt that was worth everything. I think about Dad, about his gift. About how something can have no value and infinite value at the same time. The land was worthless when he bought it, worthless when he left it to me. Worthless when I walked out of that courtroom 4 years ago. But it was also priceless, because it taught me patience, resilience, the understanding that value isn't always obvious or immediate, because it gave me time to become someone who could handle $3.5 million without letting it define me. Because it proved that what everyone else dismisses as worthless might be exactly what saves you. Dad, I think, wherever you are, you gave me more than land. You gave me the space to discover my own worth. And that was the real inheritance. I saw Rick one last time. 6 months ago, I was getting coffee at Starbucks, real coffee. The kind I used to avoid because it was too expensive. Though now it's just coffee again, not a luxury. He was in line ahead of me. Older now, 50 years old. More gray. Lines around his eyes, but he looked good, healthy, content. He saw me and smiled. Carrie, Rick, how are you? I'm good. Really good. You? Good. Busy partner track is no joke, but it's good. He ordered his coffee small black. Nothing fancy and waited while I ordered mine. We stood together by the pickup counter. The kids are doing great, he said. Michael loves his job. Sarah's killing it at CSU. I know. I'm proud of them. You should be. They're good people because of you. They're good people because of both of us. He nodded slowly. I've been thinking about that day. 4 years ago. In the courtroom, when Daniel showed everyone the photo of the land. Rick, I know. I know we've moved past it. But I wanted to say one more time, I was wrong. About the land, about you, about what you deserved. I was so focused on winning that I forgot we were supposed to be ending a marriage, not fighting a war. We both made mistakes, I said. Maybe, but mine were bigger. He collected his coffee. I'm glad you got the land, Carrie. I'm glad you held on to it. And I'm glad it turned out the way it did. You deserved that win. You're doing fine too. I am. But not as fine as you. He smiled, genuine, no bitterness. And that's okay. That's exactly how it should be. His name was called. He picked up his coffee and turned to go. Rick, I called after him. He turned back. We did some things right. The kids, the first 10 years, before everything got complicated. Those were good. They were. He agreed. They really were. He left. I picked up my coffee grande latte, extra shot, whole milk and walked out into the Denver morning. The mountains were visible in the distance. The sky was clear. The world felt open and full of possibility. And for the first time in 10 years, maybe for the first time in my entire adult life, felt completely, entirely at peace. Not because I had money. Not because Rick had apologized. Not because justice had been served or karma had done its work. But because I'd learned the thing my father had tried to teach me by leaving me that land. Value isn't about what others think you're worth. It's about knowing your own worth, holding on to it, and waiting patiently for the world to catch up. I'd waited. The world had caught up, and now I was free.